The notification chirp hit at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, cutting through the silence like a blade through wire. I'd been lying awake for 20 minutes already, staring at the ceiling fan that squeaked on every third rotation. Another thing I kept meaning to fix, but never got around to. Beth stirred beside me, her phone glowing against her face in the darkness. "Just checking the time," she whispered, but I caught the blue glow of social media before she flipped it face down. "My name is Sam Parish, and I've spent the last 18 years of my life fixing things that other people break. Started Parish Electric with my older brother John when I was 22, fresh out of trade school with calloused hands and big dreams. Now we're the biggest electrical contracting outfit in 3 counties, and I can wire a house blindfolded or troubleshoot a commercial panel in my sleep. Too bad I never learned how to fix a marriage that's shorting out." The morning started like every other morning in our split-level ranch on Maple Street. Beth hummed while making coffee, her auburn hair pulled back in that messy bun that used to drive me crazy in all the right ways. Now it just looked calculated, like everything else about her morning routine. "Beau needs money for the volleyball tournament," she said, not looking up from her phone. Our 15-year-old had inherited Beth's athletic genes and my stubborn streak, a dangerous combination during sophomore year. "How much?" I asked, already reaching for my wallet. $200. They're staying overnight in Columbus." I handed over the cash, watching as Beth tucked it into her purse next to a receipt from Romano's, the Italian place downtown that we hadn't been to in months. The receipt was dated last Thursday, when Beth claimed she'd been at her book club. "Good pasta at Romano's?" I asked casually. Her hand froze for just a fraction of a second. "What?" "Nothing. Just noticed the receipt." "Oh, that! Linda wanted to try somewhere new after book club. You know how she gets about trying new places." Linda Morrison had been lactose intolerant for 15 years and avoided Italian food like it carried plague, but I just nodded and kissed Beth's cheek, tasting the lie along with her vanilla perfume. The drive to the office took me through downtown Millfield, past the courthouse where Beth and I had gotten married 16 years ago, past the elementary school where both our daughters had taken their first steps toward independence. Small-town life has its rhythms, and I'd always found comfort in the predictability of it all. Parish Electric occupied a converted warehouse on Industrial Drive, our fleet of white vans lined up like soldiers in the parking lot. The sign out front still read, "Parish Brothers Electric," even though John handled the business side while I ran the actual electrical work. He'd always been better with people, smoother with the sales pitch and the glad-handing that kept the contracts coming. Mary Kowalski, our office manager for 12 years, looked up from her computer as I walked in. "Morning, Sam. Coffee's fresh." "You're a saint, Mary." I poured myself a cup from the pot she kept going all day, noting the way she glanced toward John's office with something that looked like concern. "Everything okay?" "John's been distracted lately. Missed the Henderson appointment yesterday. Forgot to return 3 calls from the Morrison project." The Morrison project. Linda Morrison's husband, Rick, was having us rewire their entire house, a $40,000 job that John had been personally managing. Another connection that made my stomach tighten. "I'll talk to him," I said, heading toward the back office we shared. John was on the phone when I walked in, his voice low and intimate in a way that made me stop in the doorway. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Same place?" He looked up and saw me, his face cycling through surprise, guilt, and forced casualness in the span of 2 seconds. "Hey, Sam. Just confirming the Henderson follow-up." The Henderson job had been completed 3 weeks ago. "Right," I said. "Mary mentioned you missed that appointment yesterday. Rescheduled. Client emergency." John's smile was as bright and empty as a burned-out bulb. "You know how it is." I knew exactly how it was. 20 years of working alongside my brother had taught me to read his tells. The way he touched his nose when he stretched the truth, how his voice went up half an octave when he was covering something. Right now, Every alarm bell in my head was ringing like a fire truck. The rest of the morning passed in a haze of routine maintenance calls and permit applications, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something obvious. Like when you're troubleshooting a circuit and you know the problem is right in front of you, but your brain won't make the connection. Lunch came and went. I tried calling Beth twice, got voicemail both times. Her message said she was running errands, but her location sharing showed her at the Riverside Mall, the same place she'd been yesterday during book club time. At 3:30, my phone buzzed with a text from Beth. "Can you pick up Bree from soccer? Running late with errands." Bree, our 13-year-old, was waiting by the field when I pulled up, her cleats muddy and her ponytail askew. She climbed into the truck with the dramatic sigh that seemed to be her default setting these days. "How was practice?" "Coach Martinez says I need to work on my footwork. Mom was supposed to pick me up an hour ago." "She's running errands." "She's always running errands." Bree stared out the window as we drove through downtown. "Dad, do you think Mom's been acting weird lately?" The question hit me like a live wire. "Weird how?" "I don't know, just different. She's on her phone all the time, and she keeps going out at night. She said she joined a book club, but I saw her books and none of them have bookmarks or anything." Out of the mouths of babes. My 13-year-old daughter had noticed what I'd been trying to ignore for months. People change, sweetheart. Doesn't mean anything's wrong. But even as I said it, I knew I was lying to both of us. That evening, Beth came home at 7:30 with shopping bags from stores that had been closed since 5. She kissed my cheek and asked about my day. Her performance letter perfect, except for the faint smell of cologne that definitely wasn't mine. "How was book club last week?" I asked over dinner. "Good. We're reading that new thriller everyone's talking about." "Which one?" "You wouldn't know it." She changed the subject to Bue's tournament, but I caught the way her phone kept lighting up with notifications throughout the meal. After the girls went to bed, I sat in my workshop in the basement, pretending to organize my tools while my mind raced through the evidence. The receipts, the phone calls, the late nights, the cologne, the way John had been distracted at work, missing appointments, taking personal calls, the way my brother's voice had sounded when he said, "Same place." I'd always prided myself on being a logical man. In electrical work, you follow the current, trace the connections, find the source of the problem. But this wasn't a circuit diagram. This was my life, my family, my marriage of 16 years. Still, the connections were starting to make themselves clear. I pulled out my phone and opened Beth's social media profile. She'd posted 3 photos from her errands today: coffee at the mall, a selfie in the parking lot, a shot of her shopping bags. Innocent enough, except for the comments. Julian K47 had hearted every single photo within minutes of posting. His comments were friendly, but just a little too personal. "Beautiful as always," and "Hope you found everything you were looking for," with a winking emoji. Julian Kepler, Beth's college boyfriend, the one she dated for 2 years before we met. Last I'd heard, he was engaged to some nurse and working at a law firm in Columbus, 40 minutes away. Perfect distance for afternoon meetings. I scrolled through 6 months of Beth's posts, and Julian's comments were there on almost every single one. Always supportive, always just slightly crossing the line from friendly to flirtatious. And Beth had liked every single comment. The notification chirp from this morning suddenly made perfect sense. I spent the next hour doing what I do best, following the connections, tracing the current back to its source. Julian's social media showed him engaged to Iris Torvel, a pediatric nurse who looked about 8 months pregnant in her most recent photos. Their wedding registry was still active, showing a ceremony planned for next month. But his recent posts told a different story. Lots of business trips to Millfield, photos of Romano's pasta, check-ins at the Riverside Mall. All on days when Beth had been running errands or attending book club. My wife was having an affair with her college boyfriend. My brother was covering for her, probably facilitating the whole thing through his business connections. And I'd been too busy fixing everyone else's electrical problems to notice that my own house was burning down. I sat there in my workshop until midnight, surrounded by the tools of my trade, feeling like the biggest fool in 3 counties. Upstairs, Beth was probably texting Julian goodnight, planning their next meeting, maybe even laughing about how oblivious her husband was. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated the guy who'd spent his whole life learning how to find problems and fix them. And I was about to show them exactly what happens when you short-circuit the wrong man's life. Thursday morning arrived with the kind of gray sky that promised rain, and I woke up with the clarity that comes from finally understanding the problem you're trying to solve. Beth was already in the shower, humming something I didn't recognize, probably a song Julian had introduced her to. I made coffee and checked my phone, scrolling through the screenshots I'd taken the night before. 6 months of evidence, all neatly organized in a folder labeled Circuit Diagnostics. Julian's comments, Beth's responses, timestamps that coincided perfectly with her mysterious errands and book club meetings. The shower shut off upstairs. I heard Beth moving around the bedroom, probably picking out something special for today's errands. My phone buzzed with a text from John. Running late this morning. Cover the Morrison walkthrough? The Morrison Project. Rick Morrison's house, where Linda definitely wasn't having book club meetings at Romano's. Another piece of the puzzle clicking into place. No problem, I texted back. We need to talk when you get in. Beth came downstairs wearing a blue dress I'd never seen before, her hair styled in loose waves instead of her usual ponytail. She looked beautiful, and for a moment I felt the old familiar ache of loving someone who was slipping away from me. You look nice, I said, meaning it. Thank you. She kissed my cheek, and I caught that faint cologne scent again. I might be late tonight. Book club is discussing the ending. Of course they are. Something in my tone made her look at me sharply, but I was already reaching for my keys. Have a good day, Beth. Say hi to Julian for me. I was out the door before she could respond, but I caught her reflection in the truck's side mirror, standing frozen in the doorway, her face white as fresh primer. The Morrison walkthrough went smoothly. Rick was pleased with the work, and I found myself genuinely enjoying the technical discussion about load calculations and circuit protection. It felt good to focus on something I understood completely, where the problems had clear solutions and the fixes actually worked. I was back at the office by 10:30, and John still wasn't in. Mary looked up from her desk with that same concerned expression from yesterday. Still no word from your brother. He's missed 2 appointments already. Don't worry about it. I'll handle John. I poured myself coffee and settled in to wait. At 11:15, John finally walked in, looking like he'd slept in his truck. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair uncombed, and he had the distracted air of a man whose mind was somewhere else entirely. Sorry I'm late, he said, not meeting my eyes. Had to deal with a supplier issue. On a Thursday morning? Which supplier? You know, the panel supplier, for the Henderson job. The Henderson job that had been completed 3 weeks ago with panels we'd ordered 2 months before that. John, sit down, we need to talk. Something in my voice must have warned him, because his face went through that same cycle of emotions I'd seen yesterday. Surprise, guilt, forced casualness, but this time, the casual mask didn't quite fit. Is everything okay? You tell me. You've been missing appointments, taking personal calls, covering for my wife's book club meetings that happen at Romano's with her college boyfriend? The color drained from John's face like water from a broken pipe. He sat down heavily in his chair, and for a moment he looked every one of his 43 years. Sam, I can explain. I'm sure you can. You always were better with words than me. I pulled out my phone and opened the screenshots folder. But before you start explaining, maybe you can help me understand these. I showed him the photos, Julian's comments, Beth's responses, the timeline of their meetings. John stared at the screen like it might bite him, his face cycling through a dozen different expressions. "How long?" I asked quietly. "Sam, it's not what you think." "How long, John?" He was quiet for so long, I thought he might not answer. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, 6 months. Maybe 7. "And you've been helping them." "Not helping exactly, just not interfering. You set up the meetings, used your business contacts to give them places to go, alibis to use. You've been lying to me for 7 months." "I never meant for it to happen." John's voice was getting stronger, like he was convincing himself as much as me. "Beth came to me when it started, said she needed someone to talk to. Julian was just a friend at first, someone from her past who understood her." "Understood her how?" "She felt trapped, Sam, like she'd given up her dreams to be a wife and mother. Julian made her feel alive again." "And you thought that justified destroying our family?" "I thought it would run its course. These things usually do. I figured if I stayed out of it, maybe you'd never have to know." The casual cruelty of it hit me like a slap. My own brother watching my marriage disintegrate, helping my wife cheat, thinking he was doing me a favor by keeping me in the dark. "Get out," I said quietly. "Sam, please. Get out of this office, get out of this building, get out of my life." "You can't mean that. This is our business, our family." "Our family?" I stood up, and John actually flinched. "You chose their family over ours the minute you decided to help Beth cheat on me. You chose Julian over your own brother." "It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that." I walked to the door and opened it. "Mary, can you call security, please?" "Sam, don't do this. Let's talk about it rationally." "Rationally?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You want to talk rationally about how you've been helping my wife screw her college boyfriend for 7 months? How you've been lying to my face every single day, watching me worry about our marriage while you had all the answers?" Mary appeared in the doorway, her face pale with shock. Behind her, I could see Joanne from accounting and 2 of our electricians, all pretending not to listen while hanging on every word. "Is everything all right?" Mary asked. "John is leaving," I said. "Permanently. Can you please escort him out and make sure he returns his keys and company credit cards?" "Sam, you're making a mistake," John said, but he was already reaching for his keys. "This business needs both of us. You can't run it alone. Watch me." I turned to address the small crowd that had gathered. "For anyone who's wondering, John has been helping my wife conduct an affair for the past 7 months. He's no longer welcome in this building or on any Parish Electric job sites. Any questions?" The silence was deafening. Mary's mouth was hanging open, and Joanne looked like she might cry. The electricians were staring at John like they'd never seen him before. "Sam," John tried one more time, his voice pleading. "Please don't do this. We can work it out. The time to work it out was 7 months ago when you decided to choose sides. You made your choice. Now live with it." Security arrived, 2 guys from the building management company who looked uncomfortable but determined. John walked out between them with what little dignity he had left, and I watched through the window as they escorted him to his car. My phone was already ringing. Beth, probably wondering why her safety net had just been kicked out from under her. I let it ring. "Mary, can you get me the number for Peterson and Associates? I need to speak with a divorce attorney." "Sam, are you sure about this?" Mary's voice was gentle, concerned. She'd been with us since the beginning, had watched Beth and me build our life together. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The rest of the day passed in a blur of phone calls and paperwork. I met with Tom Peterson at 2 o'clock. A sharp-eyed attorney who listened to my story without judgment and laid out my options with clinical precision. Ohio is a no-fault state, but adultery can still affect asset distribution and custody arrangements, he explained. "Do you have evidence?" I showed him the screenshots, explained about John's involvement, detailed the timeline of deception. Tom nodded and took notes, his expression growing more interested as I talked. "This is good," he said finally. "Very good. Your brother's involvement actually strengthens your position significantly. And if this Julian character is engaged to someone else—" 8 months pregnant, I confirmed. "Even better. We can paint a picture of systematic deception and family betrayal that should work in your favor." Tom leaned back in his chair. "What do you want out of this, Sam?" "I want my daughters. I want the house. And I want Beth to understand that actions have consequences. The first two are definitely achievable. The third, well, that's more of a personal matter." I drove home that evening with divorce papers in my briefcase and a plan forming in my head. Beth's car was in the driveway, and I could see her pacing in the living room through the front window. She met me at the door, her face streaked with tears and her hands shaking. "Sam, we need to talk. John called me, told me what happened at the office. You have to understand." "I understand perfectly." I set my briefcase down and looked at my wife, really looked at her, for what I knew would be the last time. "I understand that you've been lying to me for 7 months. I understand that my own brother helped you do it, and I understand that you're only upset because you got caught. That's not true. I love you, Sam. This thing with Julian, it just happened. It doesn't mean anything." "It means everything, Beth. It means our marriage is over." I opened my briefcase and pulled out the divorce papers. "Tom Peterson will be representing me. You should probably get your own attorney." Beth stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. "You can't be serious. We have children together. We have a life." "We had a life. You traded it for afternoon meetings with Julian Kepler." "How did you—" She stopped herself, but it was too late. "How did I find out? I'm an electrician, Beth. I'm good at tracing problems back to their source." I headed for the stairs. "I'm packing a bag. I'll be staying at the Comfort Inn until we can work out custody arrangements." "Sam, please, don't do this. We can fix this." I stopped on the 3rd step and looked back at her. "Some things can't be fixed, Beth. Some circuits are just too damaged to save." I packed methodically. Work clothes, toiletries, a few personal items. Beth followed me around the bedroom, crying and pleading, but her words bounced off me like rain off a tin roof. As I was leaving, Beau and Bree came home from their respective practices. They took one look at my suitcase and their mother's tear-streaked face and immediately understood that their world was about to change. "Dad?" Beau's voice was small, younger than her 15 years. "Your mom and I are having some problems, sweetheart. I'm going to stay at a hotel for a few days while we figure things out." "Is this about Mom's book club?" Bree asked, and the innocent question hit me like a punch to the gut. "Yeah, baby. It's about Mom's book club." I kissed both my daughters goodbye, promised to call them tomorrow, and walked out of the house I'd called home for 12 years. In my rearview mirror, I could see Beth standing in the doorway, still holding the divorce papers, finally understanding that some mistakes can't be undone. But this was just the beginning. Beth and Julian thought they'd been so clever, so careful. They had no idea what happened when you crossed the wrong electrician. They were about to find out. The Comfort Inn on Route 23 wasn't much to look at, but it had clean sheets, decent coffee, and most importantly, it wasn't filled with 16 years of memories that now felt like lies. I'd been there 3 days, and the routine was already becoming familiar. Wake up, shower, drive to work, pretend everything was normal while my life fell apart in slow motion. Beth had called 17 times since Thursday night. I'd answered exactly none of them. Friday morning brought rain and a text from Beau. "Mom says you're being unreasonable. She wants to explain everything." I stared at the message for a long time before typing back. Your mom had 7 months to explain. She chose not to. "Can we talk? Just us?" "Of course. Pick you up after school?" "Yes, please." The morning at Parish Electric was surreal. Word had gotten out about John's departure. In a town the size of Millfield, News traveled faster than electricity through copper wire. Mary fielded a dozen calls from clients asking if the company was still stable, and I spent most of the morning reassuring people that Parish Electric wasn't going anywhere. "What about the Morrison project?" Mary asked during a brief lull. "John was handling that personally." "I'll take it over. Rick Morrison's a good guy. He'll understand." What I didn't mention was that Rick Morrison was also Linda Morrison's husband, and Linda Morrison was the book club member who supposedly took Beth to Romano's. Another connection that needed to be traced back to its source. I called Rick around 10 and asked if I could stop by to discuss the project transition. He agreed immediately, sounding genuinely concerned about the family situation. "Sam, I heard about you and John having some kind of falling out. Everything okay?" "We'll figure it out. Right now I just want to make sure your project stays on track." "Appreciate that. Come by whenever you want." The Morrison house was a beautiful colonial on Elm Street, the kind of place Beth and I had always talked about moving to someday. Rick met me at the door with coffee and a concerned expression. "Hell of a thing, family business disputes," he said, as we walked through the house, checking the new electrical work. "Hope you boys can work it out." "Actually, Rick, I was hoping you could help me with something. It's about Linda's book club." Rick paused in the middle of examining a new outlet. "Linda's book club?" Beth mentioned they went to Romano's after one of their meetings, just wondering if Linda enjoyed it. "Romano's?" Rick looked genuinely confused. "Sam, Linda hasn't been to a book club meeting in 2 months. She quit after they started reading that romance novel series she couldn't stand." The last piece of the alibi crumbled. "When did she quit?" "Back in February, I think." "Why?" "Just trying to understand Beth's schedule. She's been going to book club every Thursday for months." Rick's face went through the same realization I'd experienced in my basement workshop. "Oh, Sam, I'm sorry." "Not your fault. But Rick, I'd appreciate it if you didn't mention this conversation to Linda just yet. I'm still figuring out how to handle everything." "Of course. And Sam, if you need anything, a place to stay, someone to talk to, Linda and I are here for you." The kindness in his voice almost broke me. Here was a man I barely knew, offering help while my own brother had spent 7 months helping destroy my marriage. I left the Morrison house with another piece of evidence and a growing sense of righteous anger. Beth hadn't just been lying about Julian. She'd been lying about everything. The book club, the errands, probably half the conversations we'd had over the past 7 months. My phone rang as I was driving back to the office. Unknown number, but I recognized the voice immediately. "Sam, this is Julian Kepler. I think we need to talk." The audacity of it took my breath away. "You think we need to talk?" "This situation has gotten out of hand. Beth is devastated, and I understand you're upset, but maybe we can work something out." Work something out. I pulled into the Parish Electric parking lot and sat in my truck, staring at the building I'd helped build from nothing. "You mean like how you and Beth worked out your affair? It wasn't supposed to happen like this. We never meant to hurt you. But you did it anyway. For 7 months you did it anyway. Look, I know you're angry. Julian, let me ask you something. Does Iris know you've been screwing my wife?" The silence on the other end was answer enough. "I didn't think so. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay away from Beth, you're going to stay away from my family, and you're going to pray I don't decide to have a conversation with your pregnant fiancé." "Sam, please." I hung up and sat in my truck, hands shaking with rage. The sheer arrogance of the man, calling me like we were old friends who could work out a simple misunderstanding. Like he hadn't been systematically destroying my family for the better part of a year. But Julian had given me an idea. That afternoon, I picked up Beau from volleyball practice. She climbed into the truck with the same dramatic sigh she'd inherited from her mother, but this time it seemed heavier, weighted with adult concerns she shouldn't have to carry. "Mom's really upset," she said, as we drove toward downtown. "I'm sure she is." She says you won't talk to her. She says you're being stubborn. What do you think, Bew? She was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the familiar streets of our small town. I think Mom's been lying about book club. Bree and I both noticed she never talks about the books they're reading. Smart kid. Too smart for her own good, maybe. Your mom and I have some things to work out. It's not your fault, and it's not Bree's fault. Sometimes adults make mistakes, and those mistakes have consequences. Are you getting divorced? The direct question caught me off guard. I'd been trying to protect the girls from the worst of it, but they deserved honesty. Probably, sweetheart. I'm sorry. Is it because of Uncle John? Mom said you fired him. Uncle John made some choices that hurt our family. So did your mom. We drove in silence for a while, and I could see Bew processing everything, trying to make sense of the adult world that had suddenly invaded her teenage life. Dad? Are we going to be okay? We're going to be fine, Bew. Different, but fine. That evening, I sat in my hotel room with my laptop and finally did what I'd been putting off for 3 days. I began mapping out my response. Not anything reckless or explosive that would cause me trouble, but a calm, deliberate approach designed to make sure everyone fully understood what they'd done and the consequences they would face. First, I needed to document everything. I spent 2 hours organizing screenshots, printing bank statements, creating a timeline of Beth's deceptions. Tom Peterson would need all of it for the divorce proceedings, but I had other plans for the information as well. Second, I needed to understand Julian's situation better. A quick internet search revealed that Julian Kepler worked for Henderson & Associates, a mid-sized law firm in Columbus. He specialized in corporate law, made decent money, and according to his LinkedIn profile, was engaged to marry Iris Torval in 6 weeks. Iris Torval had her own social media presence, lots of pregnancy photos, wedding planning posts, excited updates about their upcoming ceremony. She looked happy, radiant, completely unaware that her fiancé was destroying another family 40 minutes away. I stared at her photos for a long time, thinking about the conversation I'd had with Julian that morning. He'd sounded desperate, scared, like a man who suddenly realized his carefully constructed double life was about to collapse. Good. He should be scared. I opened a new message and began typing, Ms. Torval, my name is Sam Parish. Is Sam. I don't know you, but I think there are some things about your fiancé that you should be aware of before your wedding. I attached the screenshots, Julian's comments on Beth's photos, the timeline of their meetings, everything I'd compiled over the past few days. Then I wrote a brief explanation of the situation, keeping it factual and letting the evidence speak for itself. My finger hovered over the send button for a long moment. Once I pressed it, there would be no going back. Julian's life would implode, just like mine had. Iris would be devastated, just like I had been. But Julian had made his choice 7 months ago. He'd chosen to pursue a married woman, to help destroy a family, to lie to everyone who trusted him. Actions have consequences, and it was time for him to face his. I pressed send. The message was delivered at 9:47 p.m. on a Friday night. I imagined Iris checking her phone before bed, seeing a message from a stranger, opening it with curiosity that would quickly turn to horror. My phone rang 20 minutes later. Julian, his voice frantic and desperate. What did you do? I told the truth, something you seem to have trouble with. You destroyed my life. No, Julian, you destroyed your life. I just made sure everyone knew about it. Iris is 8 months pregnant. The wedding is in 6 weeks. Then you should have thought about that before you started screwing my wife. Sam, please, I'll do anything. I'll disappear, move away, never contact Beth again. Just tell Iris it was all lies. It wasn't lies, Julian. It was 7 months of truth that you tried to hide. This will ruin everything. It already has. The question is whether you're going to take responsibility for it or keep trying to blame everyone else. I hung up and turned off my phone. Let Julian deal with the consequences of his choices. Let him explain to his pregnant fiancée why he'd been cheating on her for 7 months. Let him figure out how to salvage a wedding that was built on lies. I'd spent 3 days feeling sorry for myself, wallowing in the betrayal and the pain. But that was over now. Beth and Julian thought they could destroy my life without consequences, thought they could use John to cover their tracks and keep me in the dark indefinitely. They were about to learn that some people don't stay down when you knock them over. Some people get back up and start swinging, and I was just getting started. Saturday morning brought the kind of autumn sunshine that made everything look crisp and clean, like the world had been washed overnight. I woke up in my hotel room feeling better than I had in months. Not happy exactly, but focused. Purposeful. My phone showed 14 missed calls from Beth and 3 from John. I deleted them all without listening to the voicemails. There was one message I did want to hear, though. Tom Peterson had called at 8 a.m. with an update on the divorce proceedings. "Sam, it's Tom. Wanted to give you a heads up. Beth's attorney called yesterday afternoon. Apparently there's been some development in her situation that's making her eager to settle quickly. Call me when you get this." I smiled as I poured hotel coffee and watched the traffic on Route 23. Julian's world had apparently imploded right on schedule. The drive to Parish Electric took me past the house on Maple Street, and I slowed down just enough to see Beth's car in the driveway next to a silver sedan I didn't recognize. Probably her attorney, or maybe a friend offering comfort after her carefully constructed lies had finally caught up with her. Mary was already at the office when I arrived, sorting through the weekend's emergency calls with her usual efficiency. "Morning, Sam. How are you holding up?" "Better than expected. What's the damage?" 3 service calls, 2 power outages, and a panel that's throwing sparks. Nothing we can't handle." "Good. Mary, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest." She looked up from her paperwork, concern creasing her features. "Of course." "How long have you known about Beth and John?" Mary's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, guilt, resignation. She set down her pen and sighed. "I suspected something about 3 months ago. John started getting personal calls that he'd take outside, and his schedule stopped matching his appointments. But Sam, I never had proof, and it wasn't my place. I'm not angry with you, Mary. You've been loyal to this company for 12 years, and that means something. I just need to know what we're dealing with." "There's more." Mary's voice was quiet, almost reluctant. "The Morrison project? John's been billing extra hours that don't match the work we actually did. I think he's been using company time and resources to facilitate whatever was going on." The hits just kept coming. "How much?" "Maybe $3,000 over the past 4 months. Nothing that would bankrupt us, but enough to matter." "Can you document it?" "Already have. I started keeping track when the numbers stopped adding up." Mary handed me a folder thick with invoices, timesheets, and billing records. John hadn't just been helping Beth cheat. He'd been stealing from the company to do it. "Mary, you're getting a raise, and a bonus, and probably a promotion." "Sam, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do. You've been covering for John's mistakes while he was busy destroying our family. That kind of loyalty deserves recognition." I spent the morning handling service calls and trying to rebuild the normal rhythm of work, but my mind kept drifting to the bigger picture. Beth and Julian were dealing with the fallout from last night's revelation. John was probably scrambling to find a new job, and I was sitting on evidence of embezzlement that could make things very interesting. Around noon, my phone rang. Beau, her voice tight with worry. "Dad, can you come home? Mom's really upset, and Bree's scared." "What's happening?" "I don't know. Mom got a bunch of phone calls last night, and she's been crying ever since. She won't tell us what's wrong." I closed my eyes and felt the familiar weight of parental responsibility. Whatever was happening between Beth and me, the girls didn't deserve to be caught in the middle. "I'll be right there." The drive to Maple Street felt like traveling back in time. 4 days ago, I'd been a married man living in that house, worried about squeaky ceiling fans and volleyball tournament fees. Now, I was a soon-to-be divorced father, coming to comfort daughters whose mother had just discovered that actions have consequences. Beth's car was still in the driveway, but the silver sedan was gone. I could see Bew watching for me through the living room window, her face pressed against the glass like she was afraid I might not show up. The front door opened before I could knock, and Bree launched herself into my arms with the desperation of a 13-year-old who didn't understand why her world was falling apart. "Dad, what's happening? Mom won't stop crying, and she keeps getting angry phone calls." "Where is she?" "Upstairs. She locked herself in your bedroom." I hugged both girls and tried to project a calm I didn't feel. "Listen to me. Whatever's happening between your mom and me, it's not your fault, and it's not your problem to fix. Okay?" They nodded, but I could see the fear in their eyes. These were good kids who'd never had to deal with adult problems before, and the sudden chaos was overwhelming them. "Bew, take your sister to get some lunch. McDonald's, Subway, wherever you want. Here's $40. "Dad, we should stay." "No, you shouldn't. This is grown-up stuff that you don't need to hear. Go get lunch, maybe see a movie. I'll call you in a couple hours." They left reluctantly, and I stood in the living room of my former home, surrounded by 16 years of shared memories that now felt like evidence of a crime. Wedding photos, family vacations, Christmas mornings, all of it tainted by the knowledge of what Beth had been doing behind my back. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step creaking in the familiar way that I'd been meaning to fix for months. The bedroom door was closed, and I could hear Beth crying on the other side. I knocked softly. "Beth? It's me. Go away, Sam. Please just go away." "The girls are worried. We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about. You've ruined everything." I opened the door and found Beth sitting on our bed, my former bed, surrounded by tissues and looking like she'd aged 10 years overnight. Her phone was on the nightstand, screen cracked like someone had thrown it against the wall. "Julian's fiancé called you?" Beth looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes full of rage and despair. "How could you do that to her? She's 8 months pregnant, Sam. 8 months!" How could I do that to her? The audacity of it was breathtaking. "Beth, you've been sleeping with her fiancé for 7 months. You helped destroy her relationship, her wedding, her family. I just made sure she knew about it. She didn't deserve that. Neither did I, neither did our daughters. But that didn't stop you." Beth stood up, her hands shaking with emotion. "This is different. You did this out of spite, to hurt me. I did this because she had a right to know who she was marrying, just like I had a right to know who I was married to. Julian's life is ruined. His career, his reputation, everything. Good. Maybe he should have thought about that before he decided to wreck mine." Beth stared at me like I was a stranger. And maybe I was. The man she'd married would have suffered in silence, would have tried to work things out, would have put the family's comfort above his own dignity. But that man had been built on the foundation of a marriage he'd thought was solid, and that foundation had crumbled. "What do you want from me, Sam?" "I want you to sign the divorce papers. I want joint custody of the girls. And I want you to understand that this is what happens when you betray the people who love you." "And then what? You'll leave us alone?" "I'll leave you alone. The girls are my daughters too, and I'm not going anywhere." Beth sat back down on the bed, looking defeated. "Julian won't even talk to me. His fiancée posted everything you sent her on social media. His law firm is talking about putting him on administrative leave. That's not my problem. He was going to leave her for me. We were going to be together." The casual selfishness of it hit me like a physical blow. You were going to break up a family with a pregnant woman so you could be with a man who was cheating on his fiancée. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, Beth. You just didn't want to face the reality of what you were doing. I looked around the bedroom one last time, at the dresser where Beth had hidden Julian's letters, at the bed where she'd lied to me every night for 7 months, at the window that looked out on the backyard where our daughters had played as children. I'll have movers come for my things next week. The girls can stay here until we work out custody arrangements. Sam, wait. Beth's voice was small, desperate. Can't we try to fix this? Go to counseling, work it out somehow? Some things can't be fixed, Beth. You made sure of that. I left her sitting on the bed and drove back to my hotel, feeling lighter than I had in days. The first phase was complete. Julian's world had imploded. Beth was facing the consequences of her choices, and the girls were starting to understand that their father wasn't the villain in this story. But I wasn't done yet. John was still out there, probably thinking he'd escaped the worst of it. He'd helped orchestrate this betrayal, stolen from the company, lied to my face for 7 months. He deserved everything that was coming to him. And I was just getting started with my brother. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp October air that made you want to tackle big projects, and I had the biggest project of my life ahead of me. I'd spent Sunday planning, researching, and making phone calls. Now it was time to execute. The first call came at 7 a.m., just as I was finishing my hotel coffee and checking the morning news. Sam, it's Tom Peterson. We need to talk. Beth's attorney wants to meet this afternoon. That was fast. Apparently her situation has deteriorated significantly over the weekend. She's eager to settle quickly and quietly. I smiled, thinking about Beth sitting in our bedroom, surrounded by the wreckage of her carefully constructed lies. What kind of settlement? Everything you asked for, plus she's willing to give you primary custody if you'll agree to keep certain details out of the court record. What details? The identity of her affair partner, mostly. Seems like his professional reputation has already taken a significant hit. Julian must be in full damage control mode, trying to salvage what he could of his career and his relationship. Too bad for him that I wasn't in a charitable mood. Set up the meeting, but Tom, make sure Beth understands that I'm not interested in protecting Julian's reputation. Understood. 2 o'clock at my office. I'll be there. The second call came 20 minutes later, just as I was walking into Parish Electric. Mary looked up from her desk with an expression I couldn't quite read, part concern, part anticipation. Sam, your mother called. She wants to see you this morning. Ruth Parish was 72 years old, sharp as a tack, and the majority shareholder in Parish Electric. She'd put up the initial investment when John and I started the company, and she'd never let either of us forget it. If she wanted to see me, it meant word had gotten back to her about the family situation. Did she say what about? I think you know what about. The whole town's talking, Sam. Of course they were. In a place like Millfield, a family business imploding was front-page news, even if the front page was just gossip at the diner and speculation at the grocery store. Tell her I'll be there at 10. I spent the morning handling routine business and trying to project normalcy, but my mind was already racing ahead to the conversation with my mother. Ruth Parish had always favored John. He was the smooth talker, the one who could charm clients and navigate social situations with ease. I was the worker, the one who got his hands dirty and made sure the lights stayed on. But John had crossed a line that even Ruth's favoritism couldn't excuse. The Parish family home sat on 3 acres outside town, a rambling farmhouse that had been in the family for 4 generations. I pulled up the gravel drive at exactly 10 o'clock, noting that John's truck wasn't in sight. Ruth met me at the door, her silver hair perfectly styled and her blue eyes sharp with intelligence and anger. She'd been a beauty in her day, and at 72 she still carried herself like a woman who expected to be taken seriously. Samuel, come in. We need to talk. The living room hadn't changed much since I was a kid. Same furniture, same family photos, same sense of history and tradition that had shaped both John and me. Ruth poured coffee from a service that had belonged to her grandmother and settled into her chair like a judge taking the bench. "I've been hearing stories," she said without preamble, "about you and Jonathan, about Beth, about the business. I want to hear the truth from you." I told her everything. The affair, John's involvement, the lies and deception, the evidence I'd gathered. Ruth listened without interruption, her face growing harder with each revelation. 7 months, she said when I finished. "Jonathan helped that woman betray you for 7 months. "Yes, ma'am. And he stole from the company to do it. About $3,000 that we can prove, maybe more." Ruth was quiet for a long time, staring out the window at the fields where John and I had played as children. When she finally spoke, her voice was cold as winter. "Jonathan is no longer welcome in this house. His shares in the company will be transferred to you, effective immediately. And Samuel?" "Yes, ma'am?" "I'm sorry. I know I favored him over the years, and I was wrong. You're the one who built that business, who made it successful. You're the one who deserves to run it." The unexpected apology hit me harder than any of the betrayals I'd endured over the past week. Ruth Parish didn't apologize often or easily, and hearing her acknowledge the favoritism that had shaped our family dynamics for decades felt like a weight lifting from my shoulders. "Thank you, Mom. Don't thank me yet. We have work to do." Ruth spent the next hour on the phone with the company attorney, arranging the transfer of John's shares and his immediate removal from all corporate accounts. By the time I left her house, I was the sole owner of Parish Electric, and John was officially out of the business he'd helped build. The meeting with Tom Peterson and Beth's attorney went exactly as expected. Beth looked like she'd aged 5 years in the past week, her face pale and drawn, her usual confidence replaced by desperate resignation. "My client is prepared to agree to all of your terms," her attorney said, sliding papers across the conference table. "Joint custody with you as primary guardian, the house, and a fair division of assets." "What about spousal support?" Tom asked. "Waived, in exchange for discretion regarding certain personal matters." I looked at Beth, who couldn't meet my eyes. She was still trying to protect Julian, even after he'd abandoned her to deal with the consequences alone. "No deal," I said quietly. Both attorneys looked surprised. "Sam," Tom said carefully, "this is everything you asked for. I asked for joint custody and fair asset division. I never asked for discretion. The affair is part of the public record now, and it's going to stay that way." Beth finally looked up, her eyes blazing with desperation and rage. "Sam, please. Julian's career is already ruined. His fiancée left him. His firm put him on leave. Isn't that enough? Is it enough for you, Beth? You helped destroy his engagement, his reputation, his future. You were willing to break up a family with a pregnant woman. Are you satisfied with the damage you've done? That's different. No, it's not. You made choices, and those choices have consequences. For you, for Julian, for our daughters, for everyone whose lives you decided to mess with." I stood up and gathered my papers. "Tom, draw up the agreement without the discretion clause. Beth can sign it or not. Either way, she's not getting any special protection for her boyfriend." "Ex-boyfriend," Beth said quietly. "Julian won't even talk to me anymore." "Then you have something in common with your husband." I left the law office feeling vindicated but not satisfied. Beth was facing the consequences of her actions, but John was still out there, probably thinking he'd gotten away with the worst of it. That needed to be corrected. The opportunity came sooner than I'd expected. Tuesday afternoon, I was at the Morrison house finishing up some final details when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Sam, this is John. We need to talk. Meet me at Murphy's bar at 8 tonight." Murphy's was the kind of dive bar where working men went to drink away their problems and complain about their lives. It was also public enough that John couldn't try anything stupid, and neutral enough that we could have a conversation without interruption. I arrived at 8:15, just late enough to make a point. John was already there, nursing a beer at a corner table and looking like he'd been through a blender. His usual confident demeanor was gone, replaced by the hunched shoulders and nervous energy of a man whose world was falling apart. "You look terrible," I said, sliding into the opposite chair. "Thanks for coming." I almost didn't. "What do you want, John?" "I want to apologize, for all of it. The affair, the lying, the money. I know I screwed up, Sam. I know I hurt you and the girls. Do you? Do you really understand what you did?" John took a long pull from his beer, gathering his thoughts. "I helped Beth cheat on you. I lied to your face for 7 months. I stole from our company. I betrayed my own brother. And what? And why did you do it?" John was quiet for so long, I thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Because I was jealous. Because you had everything I wanted. The perfect wife, the beautiful daughters, the respect of everyone in town. Because even though I was supposed to be the successful brother, the smooth one, you were the one people really admired." The honesty of it was startling. "So you decided to destroy it." "I didn't mean for it to happen like that. Beth came to me when she was feeling trapped, unhappy. She said you didn't understand her anymore, that you'd grown apart. I thought if I helped her find some happiness, maybe it would save your marriage." "By helping her cheat?" "I thought it would run its course. I thought she'd get it out of her system and come back to you." "And the money? Was that part of saving my marriage too?" John's face flushed red. "I was trying to help them meet safely, away from places where people might see them. The hotels, the restaurants, it added up. So you stole from me to pay for my wife's affair. I was going to pay it back. When? After you'd helped her leave me for Julian?" John stared into his beer, unable to answer. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of 20 years of brotherhood pressing down on both of us. "What do you want from me, John?" "I want forgiveness. I want my brother back. I want to find a way to fix this. Some things can't be fixed. You taught me that." "Sam, please." "You made your choice 7 months ago. You chose Beth and Julian over your own family. You chose lies over loyalty. You chose to help destroy the life I'd built, rather than protect it." I stood up and dropped a 20 on the table. "The company's mine now. Mom transferred your shares to me this morning. You're out, John. Permanently." "You can't do that. It's already done. Find another job, another town, another family to betray. You're not welcome in mine anymore." I walked out of Murphy's bar and into the cool October night, feeling like I'd finally closed the door on the worst chapter of my life. Beth had signed the divorce papers that afternoon. Julian's career was in ruins. John was out of the business and out of the family. But there was one more thing I needed to do, one final gesture that would make it clear to everyone in Millfield exactly what happened when you crossed Sam Parish. And I knew exactly how to do it. The Millfield Community Center was packed on Thursday night, filled with the kind of crowd that only gathered for major town events, high school graduations, election results, or in this case, the annual Parish Electric Customer Appreciation Dinner. It had been John's idea originally, a way to thank our biggest clients and strengthen community ties. Now it was going to serve a very different purpose. I stood at the back of the room, watching 300 people enjoy the catered dinner I'd paid for, the open bar I'd sponsored, and the door prizes I'd donated. Business owners, city council members, longtime customers, and half the town's social elite. Everyone who mattered in Millfield was here tonight. They had no idea they were about to witness the final act of my revenge. Mary approached with a clipboard and a concerned expression. "Sam, you sure about this? Once you start talking, there's no taking it back." "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." "The girls are here. Beau and Bree are sitting with your mother at table 12. I looked across the room and saw my daughters, dressed up for the occasion and talking animatedly with their grandmother. They'd been through enough upheaval in the past 2 weeks, but they deserved to hear this from me, in my words, before the gossip mill got hold of it. They need to understand what really happened. All of it. The microphone squealed as I tapped it, drawing the attention of the crowd. Conversations died down as 300 faces turned toward the small stage where I stood, outlined by the harsh glare of the community center's fluorescent lights. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to our annual Customer Appreciation Dinner. For those who don't know me, I'm Sam Parish, owner of Parish Electric. Polite applause rippled through the crowd. I could see familiar faces in the audience, Rick and Linda Morrison, clients I'd worked with for years, neighbors who'd watched my daughters grow up. All of them expecting the usual speech about community partnership and business growth. They were about to get something very different. Most of you know that my brother John and I started this company 18 years ago with a loan from our mother and a dream of building something that would serve this community for generations. What you might not know is that 2 weeks ago, I discovered John had been helping my wife conduct an affair for the past 7 months. The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop in that packed room, 300 people frozen with shock and anticipation. Beth Parish, my wife of 16 years, mother of my 2 daughters, had been meeting regularly with Julian Kepler, a lawyer from Columbus. They used company resources, company time, and company money to facilitate their relationship. John Parish, my brother, my business partner, the man I trusted with my life, helped them do it. I could see faces in the crowd cycling through surprise, recognition, and in some cases, uncomfortable awareness. The affair might have been a secret from me, but apparently others had noticed things they'd chosen not to mention. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. This is a private family matter. It should be handled quietly, discreetly, behind closed doors. And maybe you're right. Maybe I should have suffered in silence, pretended everything was fine, protected the people who betrayed me. I paused, letting my eyes sweep across the room, making sure everyone understood the weight of what I was saying. But here's the thing about betrayal. It's not a private matter when it involves stealing from a business that employs 12 people. It's not discreet when it uses company resources that belong to every client in this room. And it's not quiet when it destroys a family that's been part of this community for 4 generations. Murmurs started rippling through the crowd, conversations breaking out at tables as people processed what they were hearing. I could see my daughters at table 12, their faces pale but attentive, finally understanding why their world had fallen apart. John Parish is no longer associated with Parish Electric. He resigned after I discovered his involvement in facilitating my wife's affair and his theft of company funds. Beth Parish and I are divorced as of yesterday afternoon. And Julian Kepler, well, let's just say that his fiancée was very interested to learn about his extracurricular activities. The murmurs were getting louder now, but I wasn't finished yet. I'm telling you all this because I believe in accountability. I believe that actions have consequences, and that those consequences should be public and permanent. John Parish, Beth Parish, and Julian Kepler made choices that hurt innocent people. My daughters, Julian's pregnant fiancée, every employee and client who trusted them to do the right thing. I could see John's friends in the crowd, people who'd known our family for years, their faces cycling between shock and embarrassment. Good. They needed to understand exactly who they'd been associating with. Some of you might think I'm being vindictive, that I'm airing dirty laundry in public out of spite or anger. And maybe there's some truth to that. But mostly, I'm doing this because I want everyone in this room to understand something important. Betrayal has consequences. Lies have consequences. Stealing from your family, your business, your community, it all has consequences. The room was buzzing now, 300 conversations happening at once, as people absorbed the implications of what I'd revealed. I could see cell phones coming out, social media posts being crafted, the story spreading in real time through the digital networks that connected our small town to the wider world. Parish Electric will continue to serve this community with the same dedication and integrity we've always provided. The difference is that now you can be sure that dedication and integrity are real, not just a facade covering up lies and betrayal. I stepped back from the microphone and looked out at the crowd one last time. At my daughters, who were staring at me with a mixture of shock and something that might have been pride. At my mother, who nodded once in approval. At the clients and friends who'd supported our business for nearly 2 decades. Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for your continued business. And thank you for understanding that sometimes the truth needs to be told, no matter how uncomfortable it makes people. The applause that followed was scattered and uncertain, but it was there. Not everyone approved of my methods, but they understood my reasons. In a small town like Millfield, reputation was everything, and I just made it clear that mine was built on truth rather than lies. I left the stage and walked directly to table 12, where my daughters were waiting with expressions I couldn't quite read. "Dad," Beau said quietly, "was all of that true?" "Every word." "Uncle John really helped Mom cheat on you?" "Yes." Bree looked like she might cry. "Why didn't you tell us before?" "Because I wanted you to hear it from me, in my words, before everyone else started talking about it. And because I wanted you to understand that none of this was your fault." Ruth Parish stood up and put her hand on my shoulder. "I'm proud of you, Samuel. It took courage to do what you just did. It took anger mostly. But thank you." The crowd was starting to disperse, people gathering their coats and heading for the exits with plenty to discuss on the drive home. I could see groups forming in the parking lot, animated conversations already beginning as the story spread through the community. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. John, probably, or maybe Julian trying to do damage control. I deleted it without reading it and turned off the phone entirely. "Dad?" Beau's voice was small, uncertain. "What happens now?" "Now we go home. We rebuild. We move forward. Are you okay?" I looked at my daughters, 15 and 13 years old, smart and strong and resilient, despite everything they'd been through. They were the best thing to come out of my marriage to Beth, the only part of the past 16 years that I didn't regret. I'm going to be fine. We're all going to be fine. As we walked out of the community center together, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. The truth was out there now, spreading through Millfield like electricity through copper wire. John's reputation was ruined. Beth would have to face the judgment of everyone who'd known our family. Julian's career was finished, his engagement destroyed, his future uncertain. They'd all learned the same lesson I'd been teaching for 18 years in the electrical business. When you short-circuit the wrong system, everything burns down. But from the ashes, you can always rebuild something stronger. The October air was crisp and clean as we walked to my truck, my daughters flanking me like bodyguards, my mother following behind with the quiet satisfaction of someone who'd finally seen justice done. Tomorrow, I'd start the process of rebuilding Parish Electric as a company that truly reflected the values I'd always claimed to represent. I'd figure out custody arrangements that put my daughter's needs first. I'd maybe even start dating again, when I was ready to trust someone with my heart. But tonight, I was just a father walking through a parking lot with his daughters, surrounded by the quiet satisfaction that comes from finally telling the truth. The story was over. The revenge was complete. And for the first time in 7 months, I could see a future that didn't include lies, betrayal, or the constant ache of being deceived by the people I'd loved most. Some circuits, once broken, can never be repaired, but others can be rebuilt from scratch, stronger and more reliable than they ever were before. I was looking forward to finding out which kind mine would be.